And what are goloshes, Gabriel? Goloshes, Julia, exclaimed her sister. Goodness me, don't you know what goloshes are? You wear them over your boots, Greta, isn't it? Yes, said Mrs. Conroy. Gatta pacha things. We both have a pair now. Gabriel says everyone wears them on the continent. Oh, on the continent, murmured Aunt Julia, nodding her head slowly. Gabriel knitted his brows and said, as if he was slightly angered. It's nothing very wonderful, but Greta thinks it very funny because she says the word reminds her of Christy minstrels. But tell me, Gabriel, said Aunt Kate, with brisk tact. Of course, you've seen about the room. Greta was saying. Zero, the room is all right, replied Gabriel. I've taken one in the Gresham. To be sure, said Aunt Kate, by far the best thing to do. And the children, Greta, you're not anxious about them. Zero, for one night, said Mrs. Conroy. Besides, Bessie will look after them. To be sure, said Aunt Kate again. What a comfort it is to have a girl like that, one you can depend on. There's that Lily, I'm sure I don't know what has come over her lately. She's not the girl she was at all. Gabriel was about to ask his aunt some questions on this point, but she broke off suddenly to gaze after her sister, who had wandered down the stairs and was craning her neck over the banisters. Now, I ask you, she said almost testily, where is Julia going? Julia! Julia! Where are you going? Julia, who had gone halfway down one flight, came back and announced blandly. Here's Freddie. At the same moment a clapping of hands and a final flourish of the pianist told that the waltz had ended. The drawing-room door was opened from within and some couples came out. Aunt Kate drew Gabriel aside hurriedly and whispered into his ear. Slip down, Gabriel, like a good fellow and see if he's all right, and don't let him up if he's screwed. I'm sure he's screwed. I'm sure he is. Gabriel went to the stairs and listened over the banisters. He could hear two persons talking in the pantry. Then he recognized Freddie Malin's laugh. He went down the stairs noisily. It's such a relief, said Aunt Kate to Mrs. Conroy, that Gabriel is here. I always feel easier in my mind when he's here. Julia, there's Miss Darley and Miss Power will take some refreshment. Thanks for your beautiful waltz, Miss Darley. It made lovely time. A tall wizen-faced man, with a stiff grizzled moustache and swarthy skin, who was passing out with his partner, said. And may we have some refreshment, too, Miss Morgan? Julia, said Aunt Kate summarily, and here's Mr. Brown and Miss Furlong. Take them in, Julia, with Miss Darley and Miss Power. I'm the man for the ladies, said Mr. Brown, pursing his lips until his moustache bristled and smiling in all his wrinkles. You know, Miss Morgan, the reason they are so fond of me is, dash. He did not finish his sentence, but, seeing that Aunt Kate was out of earshot, at once led the three young ladies into the back room. The middle of the room was occupied by two square tables placed end to end, and on these Aunt Julia and the caretaker were straightening and smoothing a large cloth. On the sideboard were arrayed dishes and plates, and glasses and bundles of knives and forks and spoons. The top of the closed square piano served also as a sideboard for viands and sweets. At a smaller sideboard in one corner two young men were standing, drinking hot bitters. Mr. Brown led his charges thither and invited them all, in jest, to some ladies' punch, hot, strong and sweet. As they said they never took anything strong, he opened 3 bottles of lemonade for them. Then he asked one of the young men to move aside, and, taking hold of the decanter, filled out for himself a goodly measure of whiskey. The young men eyed him respectfully while he took a trial sip. God help me, he said, smiling, "It's the doctor's orders." His wizened face broke into a broader smile, and the three young ladies laughed in musical echo to his pleasantry, swaying their bodies to and fro, with nervous jerks of their shoulders. The boldest said, "Oh, now, Mr. Brown, I'm sure the doctor never ordered anything of the kind." Mr. Brown took another sip of his whiskey and said, with sidling mimicry, "Well, you see, I'm like the famous Mrs. Cassidy, who is reported to have said, 'Now, Mary Grimes, if I don't take it, make me take it, for I feel I want it.'" His hot face had leaned forward a little too confidentially, and he had assumed a very low Dublin accent so that the young ladies, with one instinct, received his speech in silence. Miss Furlong, who was one of Mary Jane's pupils, asked Miss Darley what was the name of the pretty waltz she had played, and Mr. Brown, seeing that he was ignored, turned promptly to the two young men who were more appreciative. A red-faced young woman, dressed in pansy, came into the room, excitedly clapping her hands and crying, "Quadrilles! Quadrilles!" Close on her heels came Aunt Kate, crying, "Two gentlemen and three ladies, Mary Jane." "Oh, here's Mr. Bergin and Mr. Kerrigan," said Mary Jane. "Mr. Kerrigan, will you take Miss Power?" "Miss Furlong, may I get you a partner, Mr. Bergin?" "Oh, that'll just do now." "Three ladies, Mary Jane," said Aunt Kate. The two young gentlemen asked the ladies if they might have the pleasure, and Mary Jane turned to Miss Darley. "Oh, Miss Darley, you're really awfully good, after playing for the last two dances, but really we're so short of ladies tonight." "I don't mind in the least, Miss Morkan. But I've a nice partner for you, Mr. Bartel Diarchy, the tenor. I'll get him to sing later on. All Dublin is raving about him." Lovely voice," said Aunt Kate. As the piano had twice begun the prelude to the first figure, Mary Jane led her recruits quickly from the room. They had hardly gone when Aunt Julia wandered slowly into the room, looking behind her at something. "What is the matter, Julia?" asked Aunt Kate anxiously. "Who is it?" Julia, who was carrying in a column of table napkins, turned to her sister and said, simply, as if the question had surprised her, "It's only Freddie, Kate, and Gabriel with him." In fact, right behind her, Gabriel could be seen piloting Freddie Malins across the landing. The latter, a young man of about 40, was of Gabriel's size and build, with very round shoulders. His face was fleshy and pallid, touched with color only at the thick hanging lobes of his ears and at the wide wings of his nose. He had coarse features, a blunt nose, a convex and receding brow, tumid and protruded lips. His heavy-lidded eyes and the disorder of his scanty hair made him look sleepy. He was laughing heartily in a high key at a story which he had been telling Gabriel on the stairs, and at the same time rubbing the knuckles of his left fist backwards and forwards into his left eye. "Good evening, Freddie," said Aunt Julia. Freddie Malins bade the Misses Morkan good evening in what seemed an offhand fashion by reason of the habitual catch in his voice, and then, seeing that Mr. Brown was grinning at him from the sideboard, crossed the room on rather shaky legs and began to repeat in an undertone the story he had just told to Gabriel. "He's not so bad, is he?" said Aunt Kate to Gabriel. Gabriel's brows were dark, but he raised them quickly and answered, "Oh, no, hardly noticeable." "Now, isn't he a terrible fellow?" she said. "And his poor mother made him take the pledge on New Year's Eve. But come on, Gabriel, into the drawing room." Before leaving the room with Gabriel, she signaled to Mr. Brown by frowning and shaking her forefinger in warning to and fro. Mr. Brown nodded in answer and, when she had gone, said to Freddie Malins, "Now, then, Teddy, I'm going to fill you out a good glass of lemonade just to buck you up." Freddie Malins, who was nearing the climax of his story, waved the offer aside impatiently, but Mr. Brown, having first called Freddie Malins' attention to a disarray in his dress, filled out and handed him a full glass of lemonade. Freddie Malins' left hand accepted the glass mechanically, his right hand being engaged in the mechanical readjustment of his dress. Mr. Brown, whose face was once more wrinkling with mirth, poured out for himself a glass of whiskey while Freddie Malins exploded, before he had well reached the climax of his story, in a kink of high-pitched bronchitic laughter and, setting down his untasted and overflowing glass, began to rub the knuckles of his left fist backwards and forwards into his left eye, repeating words of his last phrase as well as his fit of laughter would allow him. Gabriel could not listen while Mary Jane was playing her academy piece, full of runs and difficult passages, to the hushed drawing room. He liked music, but the piece she was playing had no melody for him, and he doubted whether it had any melody for the other listeners, though they had begged Mary Jane to play something. 4 young men, who had come from the refreshment room to stand in the doorway at the sound of the piano, had gone away quietly in couples after a few minutes. The only persons who seemed to follow the music were Mary Jane herself, her hands racing along the keyboard or lifted from it at the pauses like those of a priestess in momentary imprecation, and Aunt Kate standing at her elbow to turn the page. Gabriel's eyes, irritated by the floor, which glittered with beeswax under the heavy chandelier, wandered to the wall above the piano. A picture of the balcony scene in Romeo and Juliet hung there, and beside it was a picture of the 2 murdered princes in the tower which Aunt Julia had worked in red, blue and brown wools when she was a girl. Probably in the school they had gone to as girls that kind of work had been taught for 1 year. His mother had worked for him as a birthday present a waistcoat of purple tabinet, with little foxes' heads upon it, lined with brown sateen and having round mulberry buttons. It was strange that his mother had had no musical talent, though Aunt Kate used to call her the brains carrier of the Morkan family. Both she and Julia had always seemed a little proud of their serious and matronly sister. Her photograph stood before the pier glass. She held an open book on her knees and was pointing out something in it to Constantine, who, dressed in a Manowar suit, lay at her feet. It was she who had chosen the name of her sons, for she was very sensible of the dignity of family life. Thanks to her, Constantine was now senior curate in Balbriggan, and, thanks to her, Gabriel himself had taken his degree in the Royal University. A shadow passed over his face as he remembered her sullen opposition to his marriage. Some slighting phrases she had used still rankled in his memory. She had once spoken of Greta as being country cute, and that was not true of Greta at all. It was Greta who had nursed her during all her last long illness in their house at Monkstown. He knew that Mary Jane must be near the end of her piece, for she was playing again the opening melody with runs of scales after every bar, and while he waited for the end the resentment died down in his heart. The piece ended with a trill of octaves in the treble and a final deep octave in the bass. Great applause greeted Mary Jane as, blushing and rolling up her music nervously, she escaped from the room. The most vigorous clapping came from the 4 young men in the doorway who had gone away to the refreshment room at the beginning of the piece but had come back when the piano had stopped.